Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for the finale of the Skylanders Imaginators Versus series here on the channel. That means that today both of our casts are going to be taking on the final chaos fight, and Hoodsicle right off the bat has the advantage because if you remember to the previous episode, our dark characters from either cast finished Chaos's level, and so going into this fight, obviously Hoodsicle was on the portal already, and to fight against Chaos we need to play as the battle class that hasn't been represented as a doomlander until now, so that is the Sentinel class, which is why obviously for villains we have Hoodsicle, and then for the senseis in turn we have Barbella, and switching out for Barbella has instantly set the senseis back a few seconds due to obviously her opening catchphrase. But luckily, with how much progress she's making with Chaos already, like she's making mincemeat out of him, so she's very quickly catching up on Hoodsicle's sheer damage output because she is stacking up damage very quickly with those combinations that are all flowing together very quickly for a very fast-paced type moveset with everything that flows into another thing to make it so fast-paced and fun. In other words, Barbera is a very underrated character, as is Hoodsicle, my favourite dark representative of any of the Dark Skylanders introduced into this franchise there, mind you, but obviously the fight against Chaos here isn't the only thing we have to look forward to in this episode. At the moment I have question marks over the Imaginite chests collected and the timers for each respective cast, because at the very end we're going to be revealing of the cast which had the most survivors at the end of the series and which got through the game the quickest, as well as which collected the most Imaginite chests along the way. So that's obviously 3 categories, and so the best of 3 will be crowned as the greater cast of the 2. Is it the villains or is it the senseis? That's what we're figuring out for the finale here of Skylanders Imaginators Versus. It wouldn't be much of a versus if it wasn't senseis versus villains now, would it? So Hoodsicle has already taken a crap ton of damage. Luckily he did heal up a good bit, and he even shielded another hit, so pretty much all of the damage Hoodsicle has taken has been quickly nullified by either there's some more Pete's on screen, but he made a huge mistake, left himself vulnerable, so not even the Pete's was going to be there to save him, and already the villains have had their first casualty, so it's time to initiate the Taekwon Crow protocol, and when in doubt, go with Taekwon Crow. So whilst there is question marks on top of the villains and the senseis alike, characters who have been defeated in the past are still classed as defeated, therefore they cannot be used again throughout the remainder of Skylanders Versus. Not that there's much left for the remainder of this series at this point. We are on hard difficulty, so I have to remind everyone of this, I have to remind myself of this, because it's been a while since we last covered this series. It's about time we came here for not only this Chaos boss fight, but after we've finished with this fight, we have the award ceremonies to look forward to, and then, only then, will we reveal who the winner is of Skylanders Imaginators Versus, whether it's the senseis or the villains. Now, Taekwon Crow is immediately coming in, stacking up sheer tons of damage, or sheer amounts of damage, I should say, because obviously his fire roundhouse kick can power up all of his other projectiles, so by initiating that roundhouse kick and then firing projectiles through it, he's very quickly stacking up even more damage than he would otherwise. But given that his ninja stars, there's 3 of them, they have huge hitboxes and they deal massive amounts of damage from range. It's what makes Taekwon Crow as effective as he is. Like, Barbella is having to take her time a lot more because she needs to think through her gameplay a lot more, come up with a strategy, as she needs to use her attacks in conjunction with one another to be effective, whereas Taekwon Crow can kind of just either throw out projectiles or just do that fire kick beforehand and then fire out projectiles. You know, it's not nearly as complex as Barbella, who's now been defeated, unfortunately, so it's time to bring out Starcast in replacement of her, which is funny because obviously the senseis would have started with Starcast from the very beginning had we not needed to tackle this boss fight with Sentinels. So Hoodsicle, not even Hoodsicle, Starcast here, being off the dark element similar to Hoodsicle, which is where I'm getting my name mixes up from, but he can turn himself invisible, and then enemies will attack his clone that is also creating force fields of their own. They're sending them out, well, shockwaves I should say, so that's a really easy way to stack up damage and to make sure that Starcast avoids taking damage as well in the process. Now here's Taekwon Crow, he's charging up his blades right there, and the best thing about that charge up buzzsaw is that it comes back to him, so it deals the initial amount of damage when he throws it out, and then it deals the second wave of damage when it comes back to him. And now they've got to the final phase of the boss fight, that being for villains, but the Senseis aren't too far behind. Starcast is stacking up damage a lot more quickly than Marbella, because obviously he, just like Tycoon Crow, can deal a lot of damage from afar and save. Shockwaves coming from that clone, which obviously means that he's not taking damage because the enemies are too busy attacking that instead, but that's also sending out Shockwave, which is dealing damage to everything around it. Now, Tycoon Crow has to be very careful here, because he's already down to half health, which means he has about 300 health remaining. Tycoon Crow did not have a lot of health to begin with, but when you have a character this ranged, for rare times he does get hit, means that in order to balance everything out, he needs to have low health, otherwise he'll just live forever and the enemies will stand no chance. The game will be no fun if there's no challenge to it, and Tycoon Crow here is just making mincemeat out of Chaos's health bar right here. He's getting there, I would say slowly but surely, but that would be a lie, because Tycoon Crow is actually doing it quite quickly indeed. Once again, kicking it out with that spinning roundhouse kick, and obviously the firewall is powering up for projectiles as a process. It really reminds me of Blaststone's moveset back during the Swap Force era of Skylanders. Now, obviously, Starcast is employing a similar strategy to that of Tycoon Crow. He's grabbed some pizza as well to nullify any damage he's taken, but he's basically just keeping his distance, and he's using his tertiary attack whenever he can to distract enemies and keep them from hitting him. At the end of the day, it's more important for these characters to survive, because the timers are so much in the villain's favour that there's no way the Senseis can catch up with that, and the same goes for Imaginite chess, where the Senseis are so far ahead that the villains can't catch up. So really, either cast needs to keep as many characters alive as possible, which obviously the villains didn't get my memo, because now Tycoon Crow is down, which means that they're initiating a Chompy Page protocol, which really should have been done in the first place. Frankly, I'm surprised that they chose Tycoon Crow over Chompy Mage to begin with. I suppose it was nice to have a little variety in there, rather than always just defaulting to Chompy Mage all the time, because that's the obvious answer, and that makes things a little too boring and predictable. But hey, boring and predictable is what works. Chompy Mage is coming in and immediately starting to annihilate Chaos with how quickly he can stack up damage between his Chompies that linger. Obviously, his Chompy Puppet as well, and his tertiary attack, they all work in conjunction with one another. It's like Barbella, but this time with even greater range. And just like that, the villains have taken down Chaos, but their timers aren't over yet. They still have more Imaginite chests to collect, like the one you see on screen now on behalf of the villains. And they'll finish their timers when, obviously, the screen is put into a freeze frame notion. So for Sensei's, on the other hand, Starcast is slowly but surely working his way through Chaos's health bar, but he's down to yellow health already, and it doesn't help that Shockwave half the health that he had remaining, so he really needs to rely upon safe strategies in order to ensure he doesn't get hit anything past what he's been dealt already, so to say. But luckily for Starcast, being a ninja, he's quite nimble and agile, so he can evade hits by obviously distracting enemies with his clone when he turns invisible, but also whenever hits do get close to him, he can easily outmaneuver them, except for that shot right there, which somehow he missed in its entirety. So the bow slinger, doomlander of all things, finished him off, meaning that now the Senseis are resorting to none other than chain reaction. This is a character we haven't seen too much represented in this series thus far, so it's nice to see his return at long last. Obviously, his blades right there are dealing very consistent damage to Chaos. That's the thing, like, the attacks aren't high in damage output, but the way how the damage lingers after each strike is how the damage builds up very, very quickly with chain reaction. And the more damage he deals initially, the more damage it stacks up over time. He's similar to Nightmare in that way. Wherever an enemy has been tagged by Nightmare's sword for the first time, every attack afterwards deals that extra bit of damage. But now the villains have already finished with their time, and we don't know what it is yet, because obviously we're saving that reveal for the very end of the finale here, after the award show. But already they've stopped their timer, and you can see Chompy Mage on that glorious freeze frame right there, so naturally that is what has definitely solidified for villains potentially getting the timer. All I know is that they have defeated Chaos that much more quickly, whereas the Senseis are still struggling, taking their time. At the end of the day, the Senseis definitely have more efficient movesets, but the villains are just such powerhouses that they get through situations that much more quickly than Senseis. The proof is literally in the gameplay you see before you, like pitting these characters against each other. You can just see how much more quicker for villains deal with anything in their wake, whereas the senseis really have to take their time and play things more strategically. They aren't as powerhouse heavy characters, but boy can they stay in the fight for that much longer. Taekwon Crow didn't last all too long because he just isn't very durable. He doesn't have much of a health bar, whereas his ninja senseis, on the other hand, they're a lot more durable, unless your name is Starcast, apparently, who just loves running straight into attacks. But none of that matters now, as the senseis have finally defeated Chaos, so they can make their way towards catching up to the villains with that glorious freeze frame right there. But just like the villains did, they have to skip through these initial cutscenes, and they also want to make sure that they open up all of the final Imaginite chests before concluding the series here, because otherwise, obviously they won't have those chests counted towards their collections, and they need that higher Imaginite chest collection in case the villains have indeed won based on how quickly they've beaten the game, based on the timer, because obviously things could be quite tight here in the end, and the senseis are going ahead and wasting even more time by speaking to the brain over here, because obviously in post-game Imaginators you get the brain like quests. Yes, obviously that was a terrible misinput by Chain Reaction. He's just trying to get add a beeline straight to Imaginite Vault as fast as possible, and he's failing it miserably. What he could have done is obviously access this through the pause menu, but just like speaking with the brain beforehand, it was a huge mistake to not have done such a thing. But that being said, we now have the final few Imaginite chests being collected for the entirety of the series now on behalf of the senseis, just to make a change because they hardly ever open up Imaginite chests. But that being said, with this final Imaginite chest now having been opened, what we're going to do now is we're going to cut to the award ceremony, so I will see you there. Welcome to the Skylanders Imaginators Versus award ceremony. That is quite the mouthful, but it was nothing compared to what I went through to prepare this award show for you all. I went back and rewatched all of the old Skylanders Imaginators Versus episodes to ensure that I made notes and statistics on everything that occurred in this series up until this moment. So how long it took to prepare this award ceremony is part of why this finale has been delayed until now, but I am sure it's more than worth it because I have 7 awards to be presenting tonight to, of course, acknowledge and celebrate the accomplishments of either the villains or the Sensei teams that have went into this Skylanders Imaginators Versus series. And our first award of the evening is a statistical based award known as the Collectionist Award. Now this award is given to the character that collected the most Imaginite chests throughout the series, and that character is none other than Airstrike, with a resounding 24 Imaginite chests that have been collected. Now that is an approximate number, there is a small chance that I got the exact number incorrect, but even with an incorrect statistic, this character was still leagues ahead of every other collector of Imaginite chests, because those 24 chests, the only thing that came close was Chain Reaction with 19 Imaginite chests, and that's because Chain Reaction became as integral to the last half of the Skylanders Imaginators Versus series as Airstrike was for the first half, because in the first half this guy could not stop collecting Imaginite chests, which is what led to such a high count. He collected 20% worth of the Imaginite chests of the entire Sensei cast, 20% in just one character. Airstrike was a very impressive collector throughout the series, which is why he has earned the Collectionist Award at tonight's award ceremony. But next up is the Comeback King. This award is given to the character with the greatest comeback of the entire series. Now, if there are a couple of moments that the award could go to, such as Grave Clobber's speed and taking down the Brawler Doomlander when the villains were behind on time, or for example Blastatron's skipping the first area in the first land, whereas legendary Tri-Tip unfortunately played through the entirety of it. But this award is about more than just saving time. Since this competition is about more than just how quickly you can make it through the game, it's also about who can survive through it. This is where Wolfgang's solo shot of the second half of Dragon Temple comes in. Grave Clobber played through the water element split path and put the villains behind, but when the undead element popped up, we had to switch to Wolfgang per the rules of the series. The next 2 elements to pop up were magic and air. However, Bad Juju and Pinata for the villains team had previously been defeated by their respective Doomlander boss fights. This left Wolfgang alone to have to take on the entire portion of this level alone, and then defeat the Doomlander at the very end as well, since the Doomlander boss fight was a bowslinger and Wolfgang is also a bowslinger. Despite all of this, Wolfgang survived the entire ordeal, and he also got through the level so quickly that he nullified the damage Graveclobber did, and put the villains even further in the lead for the speedrun category. As for Sensei's lost two characters, Buckshot and Airstrike, this single-handedly evened out the number of survivors in each cast. When you combine that with how much faster Wolfgang beat the level, it's easy to see why this was the greatest comeback of the entire series, because without it, the villains would have been in huge trouble for the survival objective of the Versus challenge moving forward. But now we're going to move on to the 5 award categories that were voted on by you, the viewers. First of all is the best moment. This award is given to what viewers of the series thought was the best moment of the series overall. Based upon your votes, the winner of this award is the legendary moment when Tidepool clutched the bowslinger Doomlander with only the tiniest amount of health left to spare. After having lost 2 senseis, this team really couldn't afford another casualty, so that's when Tidepool really stepped up and took on the challenge. Next is the Best Level Award, which is an award that's quite self-explanatory, as this award is given to the best level of the entirety of Skylanders Imaginators, and of course it's based on the votes created by viewers. This award goes to the Golden Arcade, as this level is pumped full of variety, first of all to keep the gameplay consistently fresh and fast-paced, but it's also an extremely creative level that is highly distinguished from the rest of the levels in the game. It's a very well designed and memorable level, that's for certain. Next is Best Design, which is an award that can be given to any character in the series based on what the voters determined as the best designed character. This award is going to Bad Juju, whose design is simplicity executed to perfection. Her figurine is extremely well detailed, and the colours are really vibrant and contrasting to catch your eye and help this figurine to truly stand out. Next up is the Sensei MVP, an award given to the Sensei character within the cast that voters deemed as the MVP of their respective cast. This award is going to legendary Tri-Tip, which frankly doesn't surprise me. He was able to solo shot the Smasher Doomlander and the preceding Battle Gong to keep the Senseis ahead in terms of numbers of survivors, even if this advantage didn't last very long. But Tri-Tip also managed to solo shot the hardest combat sequence in the entire game, that being the light section of the abandoned amusement park. Whilst legendary Tri-Tip may not have been the quickest Sensei, he certainly was the most durable, and he was the most effective fighter of the bunch by miles. But our final award for the evening is the Villain MVP, an award given to the villain character within the cast that voters deemed as the MVP of their respective cast. This award is going to Taekwon Crow, who's been an essential member of the villains team. He was able to finish off the Smasher Doomlander and complete the Battle Gong afterwards when Pinata was unable to do so. He absolutely ripped through fire zones with no mercy, and the same can be said for the Ninja Doomlander, which he beat much quicker than Starcast and furthered the lead for the villains timer against the Senseis. This has been such a fun character to watch. It's a shame he was defeated by Chaos in the end, but that still doesn't stop him from being the villain team's MVP. And with that being said, it's time for the grand unveil. Let's find out which team is the ultimate victor of the Skylanders Imaginators Versus series. So that means we're back to the screenshot that we ended the gameplay section of this finale with, and so without further ado, the collectionist category goes to, drumroll please, the Senseis with 124 total collected Imaginite chests, compared to the villains with only 118 total collected Imaginite chests. Then our second category, the speedrun category, goes to the villains with 3 hours, 52 minutes and 58 seconds, compared to the Senseis with 4 hours, 17 minutes and 26 seconds. That's a difference of 24 minutes and 30 seconds. With the score tied at 1-1, that means it's all down to the final category to crown our winner of the Skylanders Imaginators Versus series. The winner of this final category is neither. They both have an equal number of survivors, which means that we need a tiebreaker. What we'll do is play through the final Chaos boss fight. This time we'll be sticking on Nightmare mode, and it's only fitting that the representatives of each team will be their respective MVPs. Whichever team drains the most out of Chaos's health bar will be crowned the victor of the Skylanders Imaginators Versus series. In the event both teams defeat Chaos, then it will come down to whichever team defeated Chaos the quickest. So this is one final test of speed and skill before we find out which team will be our champion of Skylanders Imaginators Versus. So who's going to be our final victor? Is it going to be the Senseis or the villains? Let's find out. Okay, before we get into the tiebreaker, what we first need to determine is which team will go through the fight first, and the fairest way to determine this is via a random name wheel where each team has 50-50 chance of being chosen to play through the level first, and in this case it's going to be the villains tack on Chaos first, because as per norm I need to go through the fight once as one team, and then I need to go through the fight again as a second team, and then I can put the gameplays side by side, but I can't play through both gameplays simultaneously, since that would mean a huge drop in skill on behalf of both of these teams. I doubt that having to play this simultaneously would result in either of the teams being particularly efficient. Now what makes this setup here so interesting, and what makes this matchup so interesting, I should go as far to say, is that Legendary Tri-Tip hasn't yet had the opportunity to go against Chaos, so he's effectively going into this fight pretty blind, whereas Tycoon Crow, he is looking for redemption based upon his previous performance, because as we all know, previously he didn't fare too well, and he's not faring too well so far either. He might be draining Chaos's health much quicker than Legendary Tri-Tip, but already he's down to 344 health. Now, Legendary Tri-Tip has also took some punishment, but he is more capable of taking punishment than Tycoon Crow, with the fact that his health bar is almost twice as big, so he can take almost twice the number of hits. Now, what's great about Tycoon Crow is that obviously he can keep his distance, which obviously he's forgetting, like he can keep more distance than that, so why he's not taking advantage of that moveset is beyond me. I suppose Tycoon Crow is currently at the disadvantage of the random name picker, because obviously for team who plays through for level first, in this case that's the villains, they're going into things a little less prepared than what the Senseis are. The Senseis have had the opportunities to wait through the villain portion so they can adapt to the villains' gameplay, and they can also learn from their mistakes. So in other words, I go into the second fight more prepared, but Tycoon Crow here, he's kind of making up for stuff. He's gone back to maintain his distance. He's using his fire kick as not only a brutal means of melee attacking his enemies whenever they get up close and personal with him. I mean, that fire lingers and deals damage over a large period of time, but then obviously his projectiles fired through for fire are heated up and they deal more damage along the way, so obviously he's keeping his distance and he's dealing a crap ton of damage from that far. Very efficient means in terms of him damaging enemies, not being damaged himself. But what's not so efficient here is Legendary Tri-Tip. Now he might be utilising meteors to his greatest most advantage. I mean, at the end of the day, the irony is really on point there. Tri-Tip utilising the very same thing that caused the extinction of the species against his enemies to cause their in turn extinction. Now Tri-Tip is also getting extremely lucky with the armors right there. That's a secondary hit from the shockwave that he has shielded on Chaos's behalf. He also has some pizza there for when he needs it. Now Tycoon Crow is continuing to hit Chaos with all he's got. He can either fire 3 shurikens at once or charge up for 5 and then charge up even further than that with a buzzsaw, which is really useful because obviously it deals that initial damage, and then on the way back to Tycoon Crow, when it bounces back, it deals that second wave of damage. But now, just like that, Tycoon Crow is down to 124. He's going to need to really initiate concentration mode. Like, he's already down to the S in Super Chaos, but that's not going to do him a whole lot of good if he's defeated here, and Legendary Tri-Tip survives long enough to deal more damage to Chaos overall. So yes, he now has quick shots, knights, and bazookas to deal with, but none of that's going to matter because he has the ultimate clutch, the one above all else that truly cannot be beaten. That is armor, and now he has spawned 3 entire pizzas, which is more or less enough to fully regenerate his health bar. That's not when he's taking knights and quick shot hits all to the face all at once. That is really not the combination you want to be on the receiving end of. But now he's already made it to the next cutscene, whereas Tri-Tip is only just down to the S. Now, what he's taking advantage of is, of course, that those fossils. Here comes another meteorite. You can tell from the darkened screen right now, the meteorite when it strikes, it is really great at dealing area damage all around it. It's even earned Tri-Tip some pizza along the way. Who would have known that pepperoni pizza was so nutritious for a Triceratops dinosaur? But yes, he's not only using for fossils, and he's combining out of his charge attack to not only have the tar keeping enemies in place and obviously dealing lingering damage, but charging into the fossils also causes a small explosion. Not quite as effective down with a certain pathway that he's down, but if the pathway is down, allows him to obviously create those geysers of rocks on the ground, again dealing lingering damage. So he only needs to do for first strike, which is a lot of damage in of itself, 100, and then the lingering damage adds up very, very quickly. And then obviously when Tri-Tip swings with his baseball bat just like that, then that's even more damage stacked on top of that. It's a very quick way to deal almost 1,000 damage. And also he has this combination which is actually really great for area effect as well. Like the meteorite, it strikes in a very wide hitbox. And speaking of which, now we've gotten Chaos down to his ooh, with Legendary Tri-Tip being able to deal so much damage so quickly, but not quite as quickly as Tycoon Crow here. He might be down to 216 health, but he's all the way down to the Chaos in Super Chaos. I keep wanting to say Super Evil Chaos because obviously that's his Swap Force rendition, and I've been playing a lot of Swap Force recently, but Tycoon Crow is taking much more advantage of that spacing right there to keep just outside of the Shockwave's range, and then deal damage of his own in turn. There goes that Buzzsaw again. The first hit didn't even deal any damage to Chaos, but it did get him on for the return back. That's what's useful about that attack. It's guaranteed to hit, especially on the way back. He's also taking advantage of the Mega Buzzer Beak. That fella is huge, and we're already down to the O, whereas Tri-Tip here, he's not even made it to the Chaos itself. Now, obviously, he has two bazookas here to deal with, but he's using that strategy of dealing for one hit and allowing those rock geysers to open up, and then keeping his distance where it's needed, allowing those rock geysers to deal the lingering damage whilst he keeps his distance to ensure he doesn't take any damage. It's proven a very effective technique so far, so obviously, what ain't broke, he ain't fixing. But Tycoon Crow is extremely close to defeating Chaos here, and if he defeats him first, well, he has no health remaining, so there is no comparison. No matter what Tri-Tip gets Chaos's health bar down to, it won't be any more or less than what Tycoon Crow has offered. So immediately we freeze frame on the first frame of that cutscene, and that has now crowned Tycoon Crow as our winner. Next to him in the top right, you can obviously find the means in which to contact me. But no matter how successful Legendary Tri-Tip is now, because he was slower in defeating Chaos, it means that the villains are our victors, crowned in no small part thanks to their MVP, Tycoon Crow. He really came through and redeemed himself for his previous performance. He made up to his team, so to speak. He couldn't have performed a greater feat. And meanwhile, Legendary Tri-Tip, even getting through this boss on so shot, and it would be impressive in and of itself. It would beg the question why they swapped out for Starcast instead of Legendary Tri-Tip in the first place, because he could have created one less loss for the Senseis along the way, being able to solo shot this, and he wouldn't have even had to have done things from the very start. Barbella would have obviously loosened the pickle jar, whereas Tri-Tip here would be opening it, and in this case, opening the pickle jar is of course defeating Chaos. So the Sensei's strategy of sending in Starcast first might not be paying off here if Legendary Tri-Tip winds up proving himself. A fatal mistake from the Senseis, who had so much going for them going into episode 8, but obviously the double loss there was the start of their losing streak when it came to characters being defeated episode in, episode out, and from there things were a lot more even in that survivors category, which wound up becoming obviously the most important in the end after it was tied 1-1. And then now we're here with the tiebreaker, and Tri-Tip is very almost there. It's very difficult though when Chaos is right front and centre of the frame, because obviously he blocks the shockwaves, and when you can't see them, they're a lot more difficult to jump over, but Tri-Tip uses great judgment and avoids them all of the same. It's going to be so disappointing should he defeat Chaos solo shotted here. It would have proven how much more effective it would have been for Senseis to utilise him instead of Starcast, but there we go. Chaos has been defeated by both of these champions, but Tycoon Crow did it that much quicker, which is ultimately what has won the villains victory in the Skylanders Imaginators Versus series come the end here. And with that having been said and done, the series Skylanders Imaginators Versus in its entirety is coming to an end. So without further ado, let's roll the outro for the very last time in this series. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!